I stood in the doorway of the living room, my hands trembling as I clutched the manila envelope against my chest. 25 years of my life had been a carefully constructed lie, and the proof was right here, pressed against my racing heart. Harold sat in his usual armchair, the leather one that no one else was allowed to touch. Linda perched on the sofa, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. Victoria lounged across the love seat, scrolling through what I assumed were photos of her latest shopping spree. None of them had noticed me yet. The afternoon light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the Persian rug. That rug had been a gift from the Carters 3 years ago. So had the new kitchen appliances, and the car in the driveway, and probably half the furniture in this house. My real parents had been so generous, too generous. I cleared my throat. Three heads turned toward me with varying degrees of annoyance. Harold's eyebrows drew together in that familiar expression of irritation I'd seen my entire childhood. Linda's lips pursed. Victoria didn't even bother to hide her eye roll. "What do you want, Emma?" Harold's voice was sharp, dismissive. "We're busy." I stepped into the room, my legs steadier than I expected. "I found something interesting today. Something I think we should all discuss." Linda set her phone down with an exaggerated sigh. "If this is about the college fund again, we've already told you." "It's not about the college fund." I moved closer, standing in the center of the room where they couldn't ignore me. "It's about who I really am." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victoria's eyes flickered toward Harold just for a second. That tiny movement told me everything I needed to know. She knew. Of course she knew. Harold's jaw tightened. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the first document from the envelope. My hands didn't shake anymore. "I'm talking about Richard and Margaret Carter, my real parents, the ones who have been supporting this family financially for 25 years, while you treated me like a servant in my own home." Linda's face went pale. "That's ridiculous. You're being dramatic, as usual." "Am I?" I pulled out the birth certificate, the real one, not the forged document they'd used to enroll me in school. "Because this says Emma Carter, born to Richard and Margaret Carter on March 15th, not Emma Adams." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria sat up slowly, her expression calculating. She wasn't surprised, not really. She was assessing the situation, figuring out her next move. That's what she did best. Harold stood, his face reddening. "Where did you get that? You had no right to go through our private papers." "Your private papers?" I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "These are my papers, my life, the life you stole from me." I thought back to all those years, scrubbing floors while Victoria got new dresses, eating leftovers while Victoria feasted on takeout, doing homework by candlelight in my tiny room while Victoria sprawled across her king-sized bed in her suite with the ensuite bathroom. I remembered my 10th birthday. Victoria had gotten a party with 50 guests, a bouncy castle, and a cake that cost more than my entire wardrobe. I'd gotten a used book and a lecture about being grateful for what I had. But there had been another gift that day, one that came in a plain brown package with no return address. A beautiful journal with my initials embossed on the cover and a note inside. "Never stop writing your story, Emma. You are loved more than you know. Always, R&M." I'd thought it was from a distant relative. I'd had no idea it was from my real parents, watching from afar, trying to show me love in the only way they could. Linda found her voice, shrill and defensive. "This is absurd. We raised you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, with their money." The words exploded out of me. "You did all of that with Carter money. They supported you financially because they trusted you to love me, to raise me as your own, to give me the life I deserved. And instead, you gave me scraps while Victoria got everything?" Victoria finally spoke, her voice cool and measured. "You can't prove any of this means what you think it means." I turned to her, my cousin, my replacement. We'd been born on the same day in the same hospital. It would have been so easy to switch us, to give Harold and Linda the life of privilege they'd always wanted while ensuring their real daughter got the inheritance that should have been mine. "Can I?" I pulled out more documents. Letters from Richard and Margaret to Harold and Linda, reminding them to treat me fairly, to give me opportunities, to love me. Bank statements showing monthly transfers of thousands of dollars. Photos of Richard and Margaret, their faces so similar to mine that it was almost painful to look at them. They look like me, I said quietly. I have Margaret's eyes, Richard's smile. I never looked like either of you, and I always wondered why. Harold moved toward me, his hand outstretched. Give me those documents, now. I stepped back. No, these belong to me. Just like the trust fund belongs to me. Just like the inheritance belongs to me. Just like the life you stole belongs to me. You ungrateful little, Linda stood, her voice shaking with rage. After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done? The words came out as a shout. I couldn't hold it back anymore. 25 years of pain and confusion and wondering why I was never good enough came pouring out. You made me clean this entire house from the time I was 8 years old. Victoria never had to lift a finger. You bought her designer clothes and made me wear thrift store hand-me-downs. You sent her to summer camp and made me stay home to do yard work. You paid for her tennis lessons, her piano lessons, her riding lessons, while I had to beg for money for school supplies. I was breathing hard now, my chest heaving. And through all of it, Richard and Margaret sent me gifts, books and art supplies and encouraging notes. They paid for my SAT prep course when you said we couldn't afford it. They sent me a laptop for college when you bought Victoria a car. They were parenting me from a distance while you were right here, and you couldn't even pretend to care. Victoria stood, crossing her arms. Her voice was sharp, cutting. So, what do you want, Emma? An apology? Money? Do you want to run off and play happy family with the Carters while we lose everything? I met her eyes, those cold blue eyes that held no warmth, no remorse. I want the truth acknowledged. I want you all to admit what you did. Harold's laugh was harsh. And then what? You'll forgive us? We'll all hold hands and sing songs? No, I said simply. Then you'll face the consequences. Linda sank back onto the sofa, her face in her hands. This will ruin us. The scandal, the shame. People will find out. They'll know what we did. Yes, I agreed. They will, just like I know now. Just like Richard and Margaret have always known. Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. My trust fund, my inheritance. If this comes out, you'll get what you actually deserve, I finished, which is nothing, because you're not a Carter, you're an Adams. And the Carter's wealth was never meant for you. I thought about all the times Victoria had undermined me, the college applications she'd sabotaged by stealing my essays and submitting them as her own, the job interview she'd torpedoed by calling my potential employer and claiming I had a criminal record, the boyfriend she'd stolen just to prove she could. She'd known the truth, probably her whole life, and she'd used it against me. Every time I'd threatened to succeed, to rise above my circumstances, she'd pulled me back down. Because if I shined too brightly, someone might notice. Someone might ask questions. Harold's voice was low, dangerous. If you expose this, you'll lose too. You think the Carters will want you after you've destroyed our family's reputation? You think they'll welcome you with open arms when you've made them look like fools for trusting us? I pulled out my phone. Why don't we ask them? I'd already called them, of course. This morning, after I'd found the documents hidden in the attic, tucked away in an old trunk beneath winter clothes and forgotten photos. I'd called the number that had been included in one of their letters, the one I'd saved in a shoebox under my bed for years, not understanding its significance. Margaret had answered on the second ring. Her voice had been warm, maternal, everything I'd ever wanted to hear from Linda but never had. Emma, she'd said, and there had been tears in her voice. Emma, sweetheart, we've been waiting for this call for so long. Now, as I looked at Harold's furious face and Linda's pale, stricken expression and Victoria's calculating glare, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. They were here. The doorbell rang, clear and bright in the tense silence. Victoria moved first, heading toward the door, probably hoping to turn them away. But I was faster. I crossed the room and reached the front door before she could, pulling it open to reveal the couple standing on the porch. Richard Carter was tall, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Margaret Carter stood beside him, her dark hair silvered at the temples, her face so much like mine that it took my breath away. They were dressed simply but elegantly, and they looked at me with such love, such unconditional acceptance, that I felt tears sting my eyes. Emma, Margaret whispered, reaching out to touch my face. Oh, Emma, you're even more beautiful than your photos. Photos? Of course they'd been watching, keeping track of me from afar. Probably the neighbors I'd always wondered about, the ones who'd seemed too interested in my life, too concerned when I'd come home from school with bruises from Victoria's accidents. They'd been reporting back to the Carters. Richard's voice was firm as he looked past me to where Harold, Linda, and Victoria stood frozen in the living room. We need to talk. All of us. We moved back into the living room. Margaret kept her hand on my shoulder, a gentle, grounding presence. I'd never been touched with such tenderness by Linda. Every physical contact had been harsh, punishing, meant to correct rather than comfort. Harold found his voice first, and it was full of false cheer. Richard, Margaret, what a surprise. You didn't tell us you were coming. We would have prepared. You've had 25 years to prepare, Richard said quietly. 25 years to do the right thing. Linda twisted her hands together. We don't know what Emma has been telling you, but she told us the truth, Margaret interrupted, her voice steel beneath silk. The truth that you swapped our daughter with yours at birth because you wanted the life we could provide? The truth that you've spent 25 years treating our Emma like a servant while spoiling Victoria with our money? Victoria stepped forward, her face flushed. You can't prove that's what happened. Maybe it was a hospital mix-up. Maybe no one is to blame. There was no mix-up, Richard said. He pulled out his own folder of documents. We have the medical records. We have the DNA tests we ran when Emma was 6 months old, and we started to suspect something was wrong. We have the private investigators' reports. We have everything. I stared at him. You knew? When I was 6 months old, you knew? Margaret's eyes were bright with tears. Yes, sweetheart, we knew, and it nearly destroyed us. Then why? The word came out as a sob. Why didn't you take me back? Why did you leave me here? Richard's voice broke. Because we were young and scared, and Harold convinced us that a custody battle would hurt you more than help. He said if we tried to take you, he'd drag it through the courts for years. He'd make sure the story hit every newspaper. He'd ensure that your entire life was defined by scandal and confusion. Harold had the decency to look away. Margaret continued. He promised that if we supported them financially, if we helped them build a good life, they would raise you with love. They would treat you and Victoria equally. They would give you every opportunity. Her voice hardened. And we were fools enough to believe them? I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. So you just watched? All these years, you just watched them hurt me? We tried to intervene, Richard said desperately. We sent you gifts to let you know you were loved. We paid for your education, your activities, anything we could do from a distance. We wrote to Harold and Linda constantly, reminding them of their promises. We even threatened to cut off their funding if they didn't treat you better. Linda's voice was bitter. And we did treat her better. We gave her a home, food, education. You gave her crumbs, Margaret snapped. We sent money for Emma's birthday and watched you spend it on a car for Victoria. We paid for college funds for both girls, and you siphoned Emma's to buy Victoria designer clothes. We trusted you, and you betrayed that trust every single day. I looked at my real parents, at their anguished faces, and I felt something shift inside me. They weren't perfect. They'd made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but they'd been trying in their own flawed way to protect me from something worse. And they were here now. What happens now? I asked quietly. Richard looked at Harold. Now we rectify this. Emma comes home with us where she belongs. The trust fund that should have been hers all along is released to her. The inheritance is secured in her name. Victoria made a sound like a wounded animal. What about me? What about my future? Margaret's voice was not unkind, but it was firm. You're Harold and Linda's daughter. They will provide for your future, but not with Carter money. Not anymore. Harold stood, his face purple with rage. You can't do this. We have rights. We raised her. With our financial support, Richard said. Support that came with conditions you violated. We have documentation of every agreement, every promise you broke. If you fight us on this, we will take it to court. And unlike 25 years ago, we are no longer young and scared. We have resources, lawyers, and most importantly, we have the truth on our side. I watched Harold's face crumble, watched the fight go out of him. He'd built his entire life on this lie, and now it was collapsing around him. Linda was crying quietly, mascara running down her face. We tried. In the beginning, we really tried to love her. But you couldn't, I said, and my voice was steady now. Because every time you looked at me, you were reminded of what you'd done. And it was easier to resent me than to face your own guilt. She didn't deny it. I turned to Victoria, my cousin, the girl I'd grown up with, competed with, been compared to for my entire life. She stared back at me, her face a mixture of anger and fear and something that might have been regret. Did you ever care about me at all? I asked her. Even a little? Victoria's laugh was hollow. How could I? You were the enemy. Every time Mom and Dad looked at you, I could see them comparing us. Every gift that came from the Carters, every letter, every check, it was a reminder that you were special and I was just the placeholder. You were never the placeholder, Margaret said gently. You were their daughter. They chose to do this, to make this terrible choice, but you were always their child. They should have loved you for who you are, not for who they wanted you to be. Victoria's eyes widened. She'd probably never considered that she was a victim too, in her own way. Raised to fill shoes that were never meant for her, spoiled to compensate for the guilt her parents felt, taught to compete with me instead of care about me. But I couldn't find it in my heart to pity her. Not yet. She'd known the truth, and she'd used it to hurt me. That was her choice. Richard put his hand on my shoulder. Emma, you don't have to decide everything today. We know this is overwhelming, but we want you to know that we love you. We have always loved you. And we want you in our lives, if you'll have us. I looked at him, this man who was my father but also a stranger. I looked at Margaret, who had my eyes and my smile, but whose embrace I'd never known. I looked at Harold and Linda and Victoria, the only family I'd ever had, broken and flawed and cruel in their own ways. And I looked at the documents still clutched in my hands, the proof of my true identity, the key to the life I should have had. I need time, I said finally. I need time to process this, to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting to survive every day. Margaret smiled through her tears. Take all the time you need. We've waited 25 years. We can wait a little longer. But she was wrong. I'd already made my decision. I'd made it the moment I found those documents in the attic. I'd made it every time Harold had yelled at me for some imagined slight. I'd made it every time Linda had looked through me like I didn't exist. I'd made it every time Victoria had sabotaged me and smiled while doing it. I'd survived. And now I was going to thrive. I turned to Harold one last time. You told me once that I should be grateful for what I had. Do you remember that? It was my 16th birthday, and I'd asked if we could go out to dinner. Just the family. You said I should be grateful for a home and food and not ask for more. He didn't respond. Well, I am grateful, I continued. I'm grateful for the resilience you forced me to develop. I'm grateful for the strength I built while trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I'm grateful for every hardship, because it taught me exactly who I never want to become. I walked to the door, Margaret and Richard beside me. At the threshold, I turned back one more time. Goodbye, I said simply. I hope you find a way to live with what you've done. I hope Victoria finds a way to build a life that's actually hers, not just stolen pieces of mine. And I hope, someday, you understand what you threw away when you chose greed over love. The door closed behind us, and I stepped into the late afternoon sunshine. The street looked the same as it always had, suburban and quiet and peaceful. But everything was different now. Margaret linked her arm through mine. We have a guest room ready for you, or we can help you find your own place if you'd prefer, whatever you need. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw myself in 25 years. Strong and kind and righteous. Everything I wanted to be. I think I'd like to come home, I said softly. For a while at least. I'd like to get to know you, both of you. I'd like to learn who Emma Carter is supposed to be. Richard's eyes were wet. Emma Carter is whoever you choose to be. You've already proven you're stronger and braver than any of us. The rest is just details. We walked to their car, parked at the curb. I didn't look back at the house. There was nothing there for me anymore except ghosts and pain. As we drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. Hope. My real life was finally beginning. And this time, I was going to write my own story.